This is a little bit of an audible. Father Gregory was supposed to preach, so here we are. But he was gracious enough to let me take the pulpit, so here we go. One of the most common questions I get when I visit classrooms of little kids, Christmas makes sense, Easter makes sense, ordinary time makes sense, Lent makes sense. What's Advent? Like, what is that? And so to answer those questions, that's something I've also wondered too. I'm like, what is it? You know, I get we're prepping for Christmas, but where did it come from? All the other things seem to make sense, but this is one of those things where I'm not quite sure. So here's a little bit of the history. I just thought this was fascinating. So obviously, Christmas is Jesus' birthday. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but if it is, no shame. It's Jesus' birthday. And this was already one of the biggest celebrations in the church by the 300s. So this is something from the earliest days. We've celebrated Jesus' birthday in Bethlehem. The nativity, as we call it. So God, big God, comes in the form of a little baby. And that's what we celebrate. But because of its importance, even 100 years into it, people were like, we need time to prepare for this. We need time to prepare for how big of a deal this actually is. And so they didn't call it Advent, but actually in Tours, France. So this town in France, what they started doing is beginning November 11th, they would fast Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday from November 11th all the way until Christmas. And that's actually how it all started. It was like a time to fast. And so it started on the feast day of St. Martin of Tours, and then it went all the way. So if you go out and tell all your friends, are you celebrating the fast of Martin of Tours? They'll be very impressed. So this continues. It's this 40-day thing. And there's kind of two separate traditions going on at once. So there's Rome, and then in the Frankish Empire, so modern-day France, Spain, Germany, that area. So in the Frankish Empire, what was going on was it was very penitential. So when they would celebrate the Mass leading up to Christmas, it was, like we talked about, fasting. And the prayers they would use for the Mass were actually from Lent. And the color that the priests and deacons would wear was black. So very much the vibe was, you know, we are preparing ourselves by fasting and sort of kind of a more somber tone. In Rome, if you've ever been there, they do things a little bit differently. This was a lot more of a joyful, more festive celebration. And I like to compare it to, it's like when you know you're having a baby and the baby's coming soon. You start to get excited. You start to celebrate. You have a baby shower. That's kind of what was going on in Rome. And so they wore white. And theirs was only a couple weeks, kind of like what we have today. But it was much more joyful, much more festive leading up to Christmas. And so what happened is that these two traditions, kind of the more penitential wearing black and the more festive wearing white, were morphed into one. And that's actually why we wear purple. And that's why you're going to hear things in the prayers about, you know, this is the mini Lent, or as we prepare ourselves, or a light in the darkness, kind of this more somber tone. But there's also this sort of excitement that maybe you don't feel in Lent. So I just thought that was fascinating, how we ended up with that. Now, one thing that these two traditions, the Frankish and the Roman, that they agreed on was this, and this is fascinating, and this is the whole point of the homily. They agreed that the day that they were going to celebrate Jesus' birthday was December 25th. I don't know if you've ever asked yourself that question. Why is that? Is it because that we have Jesus' birth certificate and it says December 25th, 0? No, that is not the case. December 25th, scientifically, is one of the darkest days of the year. So obviously we know now with modern science that December 21st is the shortest day of the year. That's when we have the least light outside. But even back in like the starting of the church, they knew, it was pretty obvious, there's a lot more darkness at this point than there is at any other time in the year. And so I just want to point out, that's not a coincidence. that we celebrate God coming into the world as a person in the darkest day of the year, when there is the least light. That's not a coincidence. The church in God is telling us something. God actually desires to enter into your darkness. My darkness. That stuff in our life that we would rather sweep under the rug and not think about. He decides to come. We celebrate his birthday at the darkest, hardest, most difficult place. And that's what we're preparing for. So when you're hearing in the gospel this sort of, prepare the way, well, what are we preparing for? We're preparing for God to come, the light of the world to come into our darkness. It's easy to have people over to your house after you know they're coming and you've had hours to clean and get things sorted and make things perfect. But it's a little more difficult to kind of have them come over without any notice, and the house is a little more messy, there's dishes in the sink. Well, think of the house like your heart. There are many places inside of us where it's like, Lord, come on in, happy to have you. And there are many other places where it's like, whew, I'd rather actually not have you go in there, because I'm afraid. It's dark. I don't want you to go in there. It's messy. Whether that's a sin or it's some sort of woundedness or area I'm hurt, the dark parts, I'd rather not think about it. But why is Christmas on the 25th? Because God wants to enter into that place. He doesn't look at you in that place and say, ugh. He's like, no, my birthday's I'm celebrating it on the darkest day so that I can go in there. And are we prepared to let him in? So I just want to close out this homily now. We're going to do a little exercise. So let's just look at the sanctuary, all right? Wake up if you're sleeping. So take a screenshot in your mind, don't pull out your phone, of the sanctuary. Got it? All right? And now Connie in the sacristy, she's going to help me out. Go ahead, Connie. Now what do you see? Another screenshot. Is there a certain thing that is sticking out to you? You don't have to say it out loud. It should be pretty obvious. This isn't a trick question. All right, Connie, turn on the lights. Thank you. As the world around us gets darker, it is much easier to see the light. I hear it all the time. You turn on your TVs, you see it. The world's dark. There's darkness in our hearts. But this is the good news that we're preparing for. God came into the world. He's here now. And when things get darker, if we're prepared to receive him, the light is going to be much, much, much clearer. When all these lights were on up here, it's like, okay, looking at the sanctuary. But when the lights went off, where did your eyes immediately go to? The light. The light. That's what's going on here. The light becomes way more clear. And so in your life, in your own heart, whatever that place of darkness is, if it's a broken relationship, there's something in the past that really hurt you. If you lost a loved one this year, or someone's sick, there's a sin you can't get over, there's a place you beat yourself up. Okay, whatever it is, this Advent is a time to realize and let yourself see, okay, this area of darkness, there's the light. It's even more clear in that place. Because on December 25th, that short and dark day, that's when God wants to come. And he's coming now. So the proposal for you today, I think we can oftentimes get concerned about, when God comes, or when he came 2,000 years ago. I'm gonna play pretend, oh, God didn't come, he's coming, oh, it's like, no, God came 2,000 years ago. He did, that's part of what we're celebrating. Or we can think God's coming way down the road in the future. But he's here in our darkness, in our midst, now, knocking at the door. And so, brothers and sisters, we all have those areas And I can tell you, we're going to be much better off if we communicate those to the Lord. Have you told him? Have you spent time with him in prayer and said, here's what's going on? Let in that light. And just invite you after that to listen. What does he say in response? Maybe you write that down. Make that prayer today.